All right, this is Raytheon Technologies Q4 2021 earnings report. And right away, I love going through these earnings calls for these defense companies because not only do you get a chance to um, hear about the newest in weapons technology, but you also get a chance to really see kind of, geopolitics. I don't typically, watch the news or anything like that. And so through these earnings calls gives me a little bit of a glimpse into some of the drama that is going about in the world. They beat on profit, but missed on revenue. Um, Even with that said, the price performed fairly well this week, up about 2%, made it all the way to 92. So, and as far as them missing on revenue, I think a lot of that has to do with the military spend. I mean, we'll get to that here in just a second. First things first, Collins Aerospace, you look at some of the highlights of the quarter. As they were up 13% year over year. I will tell you that the airplane, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that travel is coming back. Travel is coming back. And so all of the planes coming in for maintenance and stuff like that, that was up 50%. That's a big deal. One of the things that they mentioned during the call that I didn't even think about was that even with this huge increase in planes coming in for maintenance and stuff like that, Asia still isn't open. Asia still isn't open. And there are some other countries as well, I believe, maybe in the Middle East and and elsewhere that still aren't open. And so, my goodness, I mean, what an upside. With that being said, once those countries are open, I imagine you're going to have more planes coming online. You're going to have more planes coming in for maintenance, and that's going to bode really well for Raytheon. I mean, I sincerely doubt that travel is going to remain subdued. I believe the travel will come back, and those flights going way overseas across the ocean, putting a lot of miles on is to really help as we go forward here. So, how long is that going to take? We don't know. Raytheon says maybe end of 2022, maybe. But we'll have to wait and see. This is the FlightAware software that I think they just acquired or they just put out, which is really good. It's basically radar technology for not only the big guys, but also for the private jets too. Where if you're like someone who rents out private jets, then you can geotag those jets and you can keep up to date and keep track of where your jets are at any time, anywhere in the world. So pretty good there. Pratt & Whitney, so this again goes right back to the airlines. This is the new engine, though, that they are highlighting here, the GTF. And the interesting thing about this newer engine is that currently a lot of the engines that's out there are of the 6250F model or something similar that have been in operation for something like 30 years. Okay, so those are really good engines. I don't know a lot about the industry, so I don't want to start making comparisons, but I mean, if something has been around for 30 years and still going and still being maintained and worked on, it must be a pretty good engine. And so the GTF is the newer model for these plane engines. So there's not a lot of them out there. They've only been around for about 3 years. And what Raytheon is expecting is that over time, right, the more of these newer engines that get out there, that's going to then increase the maintenance on those engines while decreasing the maintenance on the older ones. It is important, though, that it's understood that the GTF engine has less parts. And so they're thinking that that's going to help drive margin, right? Meaning that you'll be able to charge the same amount of money for repairing the engine, but with less material. So that's something to look forward to in the far future. Intelligence and space segment. Now, this is really interesting. I love hearing about this. There's not a lot going on right now. I'll say that a large part of this is military spend. This is encompassing satellites, which is what I'm really interested in. And then, of course, you have personal space travel, which may happen, right? We definitely have satellites being launched by private companies all the time, and so I'm really excited when I get a chance to read about the space segment that they have going on. As you can see here, they haven't had a lot of growth there, but again, I think that has everything to do with military spend. And then coming to missiles and defense, this is the biggest loss for the year, down 10%. And again, this has everything to do with military spend. The one thing that they did talk about was potential tensions in Asia Pacific. That's, China and the Taiwan thing, which I don't think is really going to go anywhere. You have the Russia and the Ukraine thing, which again, I don't think is going to go anywhere. There's always issues in the Middle East, but I don't see any major wars or anything happening that's really going to push the military spend up, right? And so with that being said, I assume that they're going to continue losing money in this segment. And so that means that probably over the next year or two, we're going to see probably Raytheon missing these revenue estimates, simply because the analysts are going to constantly put that government military spend into their equations, and Raytheon is just not going to meet those figures. It's just not going to happen. The big deal right now is that Raytheon has something like $65 billion in backlog for military spend, and that has everything to do with the U.S. government signing contracts saying that, hey, we're going to pay you this money if you provide this machinery, but there's no 100% guarantee that money is going to be paid out. And so it looks good on paper to say that, oh, we have 65 billion or 69 billion in backlog, but all field. Same thing goes with all of their airplane stuff. It's something like 165 billion backlog, which is crazy. But that's just where we are. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this was really interesting, is that last year, and I talked about this in the previous earnings call, Raytheon did invent, create, and build hypersonic that goes faster than the speed of sound, and that's what you're seeing here in the picture, and that's super cool. And Raytheon says that so far they don't have any sales for their missile, right? The U.S., I believe, is their biggest customer. They did talk about having customers outside the U.S., but they didn't go into detail about who they may be or how much money they're going to spend. But Raytheon is expecting that this hypersonic missile, what it's going to do is actually going to then push a new segment and a new creation and invention to defend against these hypersonic missiles, right? Because once you have a hypersonic missile, well, now you need a defense system to fight against that hypersonic missile. And so, again, these hypersonic missiles have not fully been deployed. So again, that's far in the future, but it is something to keep an eye on because, like I said, this is literally the future of warfare. And as much as I don't want war to come to me, right, I am a bit disappointed that we don't get a chance to see some of the new weapons in use. I like war movies. Don't necessarily like war, But again, when you're reading through this stuff, there's just no question about just where we are as and where humanity on this planet. I mean, we have hypersonic missiles. Those things are being produced and created for a reason, and at some point, I have to imagine they will be used. And again, this is just something to think about far, far out into the future. Otherwise, Raytheon seems to be doing really good. They talked about saving money. They had a big merger back in 2020, and so far they've saved something like $1 billion by creating that merger. Right now, they have about $6 billion of cash flow, and they're expecting that cash flow to reach 10 billion by 2025. I don't know if that happens. They're going to have to do a lot of things right in order to get there. One of the questions that was really interesting to me was, what are you doing about inflation? How are you handling inflation? And Raytheon basically said, listen, we're going to search for ways to reduce cost, meaning that they cannot pass on any of these inflated costs to their customers. Can't do it. So that's an issue, right? And so I think that's going to be something that's going to be reflected in their earnings going forward. So I'm expecting that next quarter we're going to see probably a miss in revenue and probably a miss on expenses too. I mean, a miss on profit as well. If they can't figure out a way to reduce cost. You can only reduce cost so much, and they've done really good so far. And like I said, they have the intention of doubling their cash flow, which is crazy. So maybe they do it, but they do. So I'm not expecting them to, like I said, beat any estimates going forward. But anyway, that's it, Raytheon. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Yeah, that's all. Again, it's something I did think about. I always imagine myself as an analyst on the call and what questions I would ask. And one of the questions that didn't get asked that I would really love to ask is exactly how many other customers do they have worldwide, and what type of spend is that? And the reason why, not only because I want to be messy and figure out like who's buying the missiles and who's not, but also too because when you're in these companies, you want to know if you have a large percentage of your customers in, let's say, Australia, right? And Australia has some issues, and that is something that you need to worry about because the government of Australia is who's more than likely paying Raytheon. And if the government is having issues, then that means Raytheon is going to have issues. And so I don't know if maybe there is some sort of disclosure or something like that as to why Raytheon doesn't speak in detail about their customers. They do talk about having customers in other countries, though. No question about it. The other thing is, how aggressive are they being at knocking on these doors of these other countries that may have the money to spend? Maybe not on a hypersonic missile, but I mean, Raytheon has a warehouse full of guns and bombs and everything else. I mean, F-35s, they build the engines for the F-35s. So, like, how aggressive are you guys being at knocking on these doors? And the other question that I really want to know is when you're working with some of these smaller governments, are you offering credit options? Because I mean, you could literally bankroll a country if you really wanted to, and I don't think it needs to be said that you have the military power, not the military power, I'm sorry, that you have the weapons to back up if they get out of line and decide not to pay. You know, um, we know for a fact that the U.S. government bankrolls war. they just announced publicly they announced that they're sending all kind of machine guns over to Ukraine for this issue with Russia. I mean, think about that for a second. Now, the U.S. government doesn't own guns, right? They purchase these guns from guns manufacturers, and then they send them. So again, it goes back to the political rules, regulations. Again, I'm not in that wheelhouse. But I mean, Raytheon is a private company. Like, what stops them from going to Ukraine and saying, "Hey, we got this hypersonic missile. Now, I know maybe you can't afford it right now, but we're willing to give it to you on loan, right? You just sign on the dotted line, and you know, hey, if you can't pay us back, we got a couple more of these hypersonic missiles." You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It's just something to think about.